So thank you everyone so much for joining. Really, really appreciate you taking the time for this. For both of you who don't know who I am, I'm Sarah Robb and I run a course called Brand Strategy Academy. And as part of that course, I teach people exactly how to do brand strategy with all the tools and the support and the guidance they need to be able to sell it clearly and confidently to clients. But the course is a lifetime access course. So I'm also adding into the course masterclasses on topics that surround brand strategy. So things like naming and things like brand architecture. And for a long time, I've been looking for somebody to talk about how do you actually embed brand strategy into the business, particularly things like purpose and values, right? Because we all know like inherently that if the employees aren't living it and if they don't understand it and if it doesn't drive action and if it doesn't make a difference to how things are done, then brand strategy can just sit like words on a page. I've been looking for an expert and there are not many around, but Jeff is Jeff is the man. So I'm really thrilled, and it's really kind of Jeff to take time out. I know he's just got back from Asia, he's incredibly busy, and it's fantastic to have him on here to talk to us all about it. So do throw your questions in as we go, and I'm going to hand it over to Jeff because I can't wait to hear what he's going to say.
Thanks, Sarah. I mean, it's an honor to be asked, and it's wonderful not only to get to do this, but also to get to work with you because we're working together on some stuff at the moment, and it's just a real pleasure to get to work alongside you. And I love the topic because I think it is, I mean, it's what I do every day and what my team does every day. But what I thought would be a really good context for this chat today is the idea of from fluff to function. And it's something that a partner in our Asia team talks about all the time. How do you move from a concept like purpose and culture and values, which I'm sure all of you on the call have heard either from your teams, your executives, or you yourself might have said is something that's quite fluffy, to get it into something that is functional and practical and useful and drives business growth. So we want to talk about embedding purpose and values in particular today, but I thought I wanted to hold that as a little bit of a context of us. Like, how do we make this stuff really tangible and actually get things into the business? And so the context, the steer that Sarah gave me was like, well, how do we embed these things? And we have a bit of a framework that I'm going to tell you about today within people. And I'll talk about our business in a second around purpose, values, and ambition. So we call it PVA for short. So I'm going to talk a little bit mostly about purpose and values, but we're going to touch a little bit on the importance of ambition as well. And I think there's three different areas that I want to talk about in particular around the employee experience, decision-making, and strategic growth that I think are fundamental to the reason why something like purpose, values, and ambition is so important in the market right now. Because we really feel that these are the things that, when embedded properly, actually deliver on business outcomes and actually help the business to grow in a way that's in integrity with what you stand for, but also in a way that actually delivers responsible and sustainable growth for a business. So I want to talk a little bit about that as we go through. But I felt like there was three different areas that we could really dive in to make this really practical today. So the learning outcomes that I wanted to share are all around how do you get buy-in for something like purpose, values, and ambition across the business, because that's critical to really using culture. How do you make purpose and values in particular really practical and tactical? What are the ways that you really start to embed into the business? And what are the ways that you start to measure impact to demonstrate that purpose and values and culture in particular is actually driving the business forward, and then therefore moving from the fluffiness. I'm going to use real case studies today. I'm not going to go into all the detail of the client's particular values or behaviors. We'll talk a little bit about their particular purpose or purpose, but because I think that makes it very tangible for everybody. So I'm not talking in absolutes, but actually in real case studies of work that me and my team have delivered on, and work that I'm really proud of. And I want to give some do's and don'ts. So in particular, some things that haven't gone so well, or things that I've noticed have tripped us up over the years. So I hope this is really practical for everybody, but I'm not really used to like talking for 40 minutes. So I asked Sarah if we could stop along the way and pull some questions. So I'd really love for everyone to ask as many questions as they can. I hope we can get through them all. Be as detailed in your question as you want. I'll try to answer it as detailed as I can. Sarah's going to watch the chat to pull those out, but there's points along the way that I'm definitely going to stop. And Sarah, if you can, I guess, coordinate those questions for us, that would be really useful. So please don't be shy. Put your hand up, and we're definitely going to leave some time at the end just for open forum FAQ, in which I hope we can do that in a much more discursive way. How does that sound? Good. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, great.
Let's get into it. Okay, so a little bit about me and Within People. We're a team. We're based all over the world. We started in 2014. We started in London. Actually, I used to live in the UK for quite some time before moving to San Francisco in the pandemic. I started the business with my business partner, Laurie Bennett. We had been working in sustainability consulting for quite some time, and that was focused around brand development and brand strategy with sustainability at its heart. So really helping brands to be authentically greener, I guess you could say, to avoid greenwash and to be a responsible brand. So that's where my brand strategy journey began. But before that, I ran a record label and I was a DJ and made music. And I sort of had to grow my own brand. I had to be my own brand and know my own brand strategy. So I'd always been interested in this notion of how do you create that sense of a really powerful brand that does what it says in the world. I think I found myself in the sustainability space, which was really rewarding, but also quite exhausting. It's quite a tough space to be in. And actually, as I went through that journey, found that I was a little bit more interested in why people do what people do and how do people create really remarkable brands than I was in just making a brand sound and act more environmentally sustainable. I'm still deeply interested in that, but I found that my calling, my passion was lending itself more towards why people do what they do. And with that notion of the why being quite critical, we set up Within People. And the idea being that people should love what they do. They should love who they are. They should be able to go to work and have a really fulfilling experience. And that experience has to be derived from some sense of common purpose, unity, and values. And with that at its heart, we started to create over the last decade this, what we call the blueprint. And so this is our method. We call it the Within Way. It is a series of client interventions that all start, we tend to start at the 12 o'clock position of what you stand for, which is purpose, values, and offer or ambition, and move the client on a journey around the blueprint. And the idea was that if a client went through the blueprint, they would be a purpose-driven brand because they would have integrated their purpose and values into their strategic planning. They would have integrated it into their EX, how work is experienced, to their employee experience, and into their leadership. So all of us are some degree of coaches as well. We don't tend to consult in the business. We don't go in and tell the client who they are and what they do or how to lead. We coach them with the idea being that they have everything inside of them to make a really great business and brand and be a great leader, but they might need to tap into some new learning for themselves or even some unlearning of how things have been. And our vision is that we're creating purpose-driven and equitable organizations. So our clients tend to stay with us for quite some time because they join at the sort of help me find our purpose and articulate our values. And they tend to then go on the bit of the journey of growth. We're going to talk a little bit about we're definitely going to be talking about the what you stand for today, because I think that's why we're here, as a brand strategy point of view, but we're going to be touching a little bit on the orange and the blue as well, around, well, how do you get this into to drive strategic outcomes? How do you get the purpose, values, and ambition to drive strategic outcomes and also to deliver on the experience of work, as I feel like those are two areas where you really feel this sense of embedding. So with that, let's dive in. So Sarah's told me a little bit about what she's been doing with the learning experiences that she's been creating for all of you. And if this is your first time joining one of these, I'm working under the assumption that you're probably working in a space of helping clients find their purpose or understand their values. This is the framework that I talked about before, that we use: purpose, values, and ambition. And as I said, this is kind of the entry point for a lot of our clients. They need to codify this. And I think a lot of you have probably worked in that space before, where you're helping a client find purpose, or you're helping them understand what their brand values are, or maybe even helping them set a mission or a vision statement. And this is essential to the work we do. So every client that we have has a defined PVA framework. They might have come to us with one of these things already and they need it tinkered, or they might have come to us with nothing. In the case studies today, I'll navigate a little bit of that with you. But the pain points that we've identified for clients are of why they need these things. And I think this is really important to anchor around when it comes to embedding purpose and values. Are these, and this is not exhaustive, but these 5 are things that we tend to see. Culture means something different to everybody. It might feel like we have a bunch of different businesses, or a lot of our work in Asia is around large conglomerates who are literally different kinds of businesses. They might own hotels, airlines, and a food business. And how then do they start to unite the business under one strategic framework? A lot of our work is around fast growth businesses, especially in our tech clients. We're growing really fast. We don't want to lose that sense of being a small business, or having a culture where people are really close knit, and we're about to double or triple in size. So how do we hold on to that? Not so much in this space, but we have had cases where we don't like our culture. It's a little bit toxic. We want to fix some things, and we need to have a bit of a code to do that. And also the notion that, well, our people aren't working well together. They're not collaborating, or they feel like things are misaligned. And really, this framework of purpose, values, and ambition is about bringing alignment into the business. So the core thing that this framework does is everybody knows who we are. We all know what we stand for, and we're all on the same bus. And I think if you haven't codified these things, you have a culture inherently already. You will always have a culture, even if you don't write it down inside a business. But once we've gotten it written down, at least we know what we are supposed to stand for, and we know why we're here, and we know how we're all about to expected to show up. And without writing it down, we don't have that. So it's critical, in order to move the business forward into the kinds of growth the business wants to see, to have this kind of framework codified. And so when you're creating a purpose for your clients, or when you're creating values, it's not really just for an external brand strategy to help the customer, the client, the guest understand what you stand for. It is for the whole business to really know what you stand for. And to do that in integrity means there needs to be only one framework. And that's something that's very core to the within principle. We have one purpose, one set of values, and one ambition that we're moving forward to. And we communicate that transparently and authentically to all of our stakeholders. And so this is a bit of a definition that we use when it comes to purpose. It is the why, it's what we're here for, and it guides our ambition for growth. So it has to be true to us. It has to be very simple and memorable, and it has to reflect who we've always been. And even if you're working with a business who's been around for 50 or 100 years, maybe that some of that who we've always been is lost. That's the art of what you're doing, is really uncovering that truth of what the business is for. But it isn't a goal, and it isn't a catchy, punchy tagline. So I am very clear when I'm working with clients that their purpose is not a brand tagline. It is not a brand slogan. It is not a social purpose or something that is there just to guide one element of the business. There is one purpose to rule them all. and therefore it has to be right. And since today is all about embedding purpose, I thought I just wanted to anchor that around what it means from the within perspective. If you're interested more about our perspective on that, and I know it's very aligned to Sarah's and how Sarah works, on our website is our guide to finding purpose. You can download that. It gives you the top 10 tips on helping clients find purpose and a little bit of our formula of that we use to make sure that the purpose is right. And I think that's one thing that's kind of critical in this framework is get the purpose and values right. The embedding, therefore, becomes a lot easier. But let's get into embedding. So there's 3 different pieces of the embedding that I wanted to talk about today. And the first one is building meaning. So I'm going to go into this section, just a couple of stories, then we can stop and see if there's been any questions so far. So once we've got our purpose and values and our ambition, we need to give it to the business as a whole. It has to become owned by the people for whom it is therefore useful for. And so this first phase that after we've codified purpose and values is to start a meaning building exercise. And the very critical first piece of that is to start to engage the leadership first, because they're the ones that are going to need to lead with this. And the story I want to tell throughout this bit is the work that we did for One and Only. If you haven't had a chance to stay at a One and Only resort, put it in your life plan, because they are truly remarkable One and Only places. There's only about 10 of them in the world. They're owned by Kerzner, who also own Atlantis. It is a set of ultra luxury properties. They were growing very, very fast and expanding over the world. They have quite ambitious goals of how they want to grow, but they needed to codify the way that they wanted to grow through a service standard that would really help them be distinctive, but also unite their people around one way of delivering their ultra luxury service. They already had a purpose that they brought to us, which is we create joy, which is a wonderful purpose to work with, but they didn't have any meaning behind it. It had emerged through a purpose process, but the business didn't really know what it meant. And since the properties that they had owned at that time were very disparate and distinct, they really wanted to unite and unify the business around the purpose and to have a distinct set of service behaviors or values that would make every stay at a One and Only feel consistent, but also unique, hence the name One and Only. And so it was quite a challenge because you've got to create something that can be deployed across many properties, but allow people to have a little bit of freedom in the frame. So like I said, the very first thing we needed to do was to unite leadership around a set of behaviors and the purpose of We Create Joy. And so this is Philippe Zuber, who at the time was COO, is now the CEO of Kerzner. This is him signing the values that we worked on with them and aligned to the purpose. And the idea here was to bring, in order to really make sure that purpose and values are embedded, the general managers of every hotel, every property needed to believe in them. So they had to become something that everybody was going to take into their business and actually deploy. And that I think it's Simon Sinek that said, there goes the leader, there goes the culture. Without the general managers getting on board and believing in the framework that was established, this was never going to work. So we needed to, the very first part of the meaning building was to bring them all together, to stress test what was created, but to get them to create the business case for why this was going to drive growth. So to really work with them to understand what are the metrics that we're going to use, how is this going to drive growth, what are the ways that we're going to see this delivering on the different business outcomes that we know as executives are important and critical to a 5 or 10 year growth plan. That was a one-day experience for them that we took them through. And the signing of this is a little bit of a ritual, right? I sign up to get on this bus, that actually this is the framework that we're going to use to drive growth. So that's a critical first step. It's something that we do with all of our clients at that stage before we go into the rest of the embedding. Is your leadership team on the bus with this? The next stage is to take it out to the people and to get them to build their own meaning. And with One and Only, we had Joy Day. This was one day in September around the world where the purpose and the new behaviors of the values were launched. That was a ritual that everybody could create in their own properties that were really, really memorable. And I think this idea of a launch of something is kind of important from a human perspective. Like, we like ritual, we like celebration, we like the memorability of it. And to create something that was unique for every property, but had the same consistency of meaning building was really critical. So every resort got to launch joy. We create joy in their own way. But what immediately followed was a series of workshops where every employee went through the values and the purpose and got to understand what it meant to them, what it meant for them in their role, how they lived the values already, and what they could do to live the values even more and really connect in to what the purpose and values meant to them. That was the start of an ongoing immersion process that I'm going to talk about in a second. But I think without that kind of celebration and bringing people together, there's no point in the business where you sort of end the old way of seeing ourselves and enter the new. And although if I joined One and Only today, I wouldn't have gone to a Joy Day. In my onboarding, I will still have a Joy Day, and this will be talked about forevermore as the day that the business stepped into really embracing their purpose and their values. So it's quite critical to the meaning building experience. I think I'm going to stop there, Sarah. I'm just going to say just one watch out before we go to maybe some questions is all clients want the big launch and they want something that is the hurrah celebration. But clients don't know what to do after that. And as strategists, we have to guide them. We have to tell them and design with them the next steps, which I'm going to take us through in a second. But be prepared that the client is excited about the launch, but they have no idea what to do next. And you can't leave your people hanging. So there's got to be something that follows a big launch that actually helps people take them on the journey. And I think we learned early on in the Within world that the big launch was important. We would get excited about that, but we didn't get the client excited about the next stage of the journey. And you had this flat energy where things didn't go further. And now we know much better. And clients don't get the big launch unless they do the next thing, because I want to know the impact is there. And while I said the impact of the big launch is important, what follows in the next stage is much more important than that.
That's great.
Sarah, do we have any?
Yeah.
Pause.
No, it's fantastic. Christine is asking, she said, I'd be really interested to hear thoughts on scaling down embedding exercises, like Joy Day, but for smaller businesses, i.e., ones with less resource and budget.
Yeah, awesome question. And I think the concept of the ritual and the celebration is what you need to hold on to. So you're right, like One and Only went big with it, but still quite meager. I mean, every resort had to run it through their own CapEx. So they still had to manage their own resources for it. And some did really big things and some did something that was a bit smaller. But I think for a smaller business, the concept is, okay, we still need to have the celebration. We still need to do the ritual. The idea there is we got to bring people together. So how can we do that? We can do that. We can still do that in a hybrid way. We could do that in a virtual way. We could get everyone together, even at the end of the day, and bring them together around a little bit of a celebration where the CEO or the general manager speaks to how important this is, but still runs something that's a meaning building exercise. So you don't have to go, all clowns, unicorns, and balloons. That doesn't make it meaningful, but bringing people together is what's most important. So find the way to ritualize it that works best for the client. Joy Day was what works best for One and Only, but I think it has to be bespoke to the context of the client.
Great. Yeah. Brilliant. Any more questions in the chat before we keep moving on? I think everyone wants to go to One and Only now, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, sorry everyone. Sorry to ruin. Put that in your plan for the next. I mean, yeah, it's quite remarkable. The other thing that we love about our work is we get to travel a lot, and I was very spoiled on that one. Yeah. Okay, well, let's move into this one because I think I mean it might feel quite obvious. Okay, we've got a codified purpose and values. We need to get people to buy into it. Leadership, yes. The people, yes. Ritual, yes. Jeff. Okay, the next bit is we need to embed it into the employee experience. So this has to become something that really is the way our business operates, and the best way to feel that purpose and values is embedded in the business is that it becomes integral to the employee experience. And when I say that, I mean the entire experience of before someone joins the business all the way through to when they become alumni of the business. It has to be something that's in integrity of the way this business operates. And the way that that is most felt is in the day-to-day experience of the employees. And from our point of view at Within, that's everything from the way we work and collaborate together to the way that we communicate and connect with each other and make decisions, to how we're rewarded and feel valued, and to the way that we learn and grow. So for something like example, We Create Joy, that had to be felt within every element of that. And it has to be felt from before I've even joined. So in my employer brand, to how I'm recruited, to how I develop within the business, and then to how I to maybe exit. I mean, most people will find their next journey. And I think for every brand that wants to live in integrity with its purpose and values, is that before you join, you know what we stand for. And when you leave, you're still telling people we stand for that same thing that when you joined. And so that consistency of that employee experience becomes really important. And this is where our work kind of shifts from the brand and communication space into something that some of you might feel is a little bit more in the customer design and in the HR experience. And I think that's where I feel like our job as strategists becomes a little bit more multidisciplinary. So if you've got a marcoms background, that's great. If you've got an HR background, that's also great, because those skills are needed for this next bit. And I think one thing that's really important in this embedding into the EX is this is not HR's job to do or marketing's job to do. It is all manager and leaders' job to do. So it's really the time to bring the business together around embedding the strategic framework into the everyday. So this story, I'm going to use another hospitality example because I love hospitality, and Corinthia Hotels, we've been working with them for quite some time now, and they've really got the embedding part of it right. They are a group of hotels based in Europe. If you're in London, you may have been to the Corinthia London. It's a wonderful property just down in Embankment. They're also based in Malta. We've got a new hotel opening in Rome, another one in Brussels. And for the Americans on the call, it's going to be one in New York opening next year. So again, luxury properties, a distinct way of serving, but hadn't quite codified that. Luckily, they had Sarah to help them out with the codification of what it means to be to serve in the Corinthia way, and a new purpose as well, which is to uplift lives. Different to Creating Joy, different energy, similar kind of tone, but a very different meaning of what that means. And what I think is remarkable about uplifting lives is it really lends itself not only to the customer experience, but also to the employee experience, in the same way that We Create Joy was not just about creating joy for the guest, but also creating joy for the employee. And I think when you get a purpose that's got that duality of what it's like inside the business and outside the business, you've got something really, really powerful. So Corinthia needed that consistency, just like One and Only did, around how are we going to grow and expand the business, but keep the core of what Corinthia means inside the experience of it. And their chairman that founded the business is getting on in years, still very active, intelligent, wonderful man, but wants to make sure that as he exits the business, that legacy of what he's created is codified and it will be instilled in the business as it grows. So in order to do that, we not only have to teach people the Corinthia way of serving guests, but also change the way the employee experience looks and feels. So what we've done with Corinthia is created the Uplifting Lives Toolkit. And this really looks at the different ways to embed the purpose and the values at different touch points in the employee journey. And we've broken it down into 3 different areas: the way that we recruit, the way that we onboard people, and the way that we grow. And recruit is everything that happens before someone joins. Onboard is in the first sort of 90 days of their employment with the business, and grow is what happens for the rest of the tenure. So we needed to have interventions that demonstrate the embedding of the purpose and values along the different stages of the employee journey. It can't just be felt in one place. It's got to be sustainable across the journey. So with recruiting, we've got a new way of telling an employer brand story. We've got a whole different way of creating a recruitment experience that really feels much more uplifting and distinctive. And like I said, they're about to open new properties in Rome, Brussels, and New York. So it's the first time in a long time that the business is recruiting at bulk. So we've got to really be very different to the Four Seasons and the Mandarin Orientals of the world. We have to make our mark, especially thinking about moving into Rome and New York, where you've got very distinct cities that have established brands in them already. Carinthia is not known there. So that, what do we stand for? What are we known for? That has to be put into the recruitment experience. But the onboarding piece is critical, because we've got to get people who have joined into understanding what we stand for and how do we deliver on that. So this middle square is all about the culture immersion. We've got a series of modules where people learn how to serve guests through the Carinthia spirit, which is their values, and how to collaborate with each other through the Carinthia spirit. So it's very practical and tactical ways that the values begin to be lived in the business. So it's a bit of training. It's got the meaning building that we saw in the one and only example, but it's very tactical and tangible. And people are therefore learning new skills, and there can be assessed on those skills as they start to move into the next phase, which is the growing phase. And here we've got everything from culture ambassadors across the business, really representing the culture, to different ways of managing people and measuring people's performance and helping them create growth plans that allow them to see their career within Carinthia grow, because they're growing through the skills they're learning through the purpose and the values. And then finally, of course, a sense of recognition based around the values and purpose. So each of these different squares is a toolkit upon itself. It's something that can be deployed consistently across all the different properties. And as they grow, will become just the way of being at Carinthia. So it's kind of like the operating system now. We've got the strategy, but this becomes the way the business operates throughout the employee experience. And just to make that even a little bit more practical, I wanted to share an example from Cartier. Very similar. Cartier retail in the Middle East asked us to redesign their onboarding process so that everybody got that sense of what it was like to be in Cartier and understand Cartier, but also to really start to embed a different way of serving. Though if you go to a Cartier store, it's got to feel very different from if you're going into any other luxury retail. So they really have to understand everything about Cartier in a very short amount of time. And so we use the purpose and values of Cartier as the foundation of that, but take them through the history of the business, the product knowledge that they're going to need to know, which is so critical to buying a Cartier product, to really serving in the Cartier way, which has to feel completely different than if you've walked into Hermes. So, and then understanding how we collaborate with each other. So this kind of taking what you've got from your brand strategy and making it into something very tactical. It is a little bit of moving into an L&D space of learning with the client and helping the client transfer that knowledge, but making it always experiential and making sense to what is in alignment with the purpose and values, so that when you step into Cartier, or if you step into Carinthia or One and Only, you feel like you're there. And it becomes a much more of a embedded way of feeling the values, rather than just something that are words on the wall. It becomes very practical in a way of being within the business. I'm going to pause there. Anything else in the chat?
Yeah, there's a couple of questions. So Sarah's asking, she'd love to hear a bit more about how you drove consensus around purpose and values in the senior leadership.
Ooh.
How do you drive consensus?
Okay. Just let's go to this before I go to, I'll come back to that. Watch out. Okay, driving consensus. So remember I said at the very beginning that purpose and values and ambition, that PVA framework, that is really about alignment. So what we're kind of looking for is everybody gets on the bus. So they don't necessarily have to have a sense of consensus, because to me, consensus means everybody has to have, we all agree with something and we've kind of made it beige enough that it works for everybody, but rather everybody is in alignment that this is what's going to drive our business forward. And I will disagree and commit to some things that maybe don't work for me in there, but as a leader, I'm willing to go, yeah, I'm gonna stand for that now. And I think the process of that alignment goes back into that meaning building phase that I talked about before, where you need to get everybody to understand the business outcomes. So rather than people getting into agreement on the words or the nuance of things within your strategic framework, which is where people get stuck, you've got to take them up to 30,000 feet and go, what is this in service of? Do we agree that something like this, in the way that it is going to deliver on the growth plans that we've got? So for example, with Corinthia, we brought the executive team together with the general managers and we said, here's the purpose and values. We've been working through a process of this for many months. Many of you have been involved. I'm not here today to argue the words of it, but rather, do we agree that this is the kind of thing that's going to take us towards the growth ambition we have of opening 5 new hotels in the next 2 years and then expanding across regions? And is it going to answer some of the tensions that we have in the business around lack of consistency, a misunderstanding of what it means to serve in the Corinthia way, into attracting and retaining the right talent, because we're finding it hard to compete with the Four Seasons of the world. So you've got to get them up at that level and get them out of the weeds of the words in order to get to the consensus that you need.
Great. There's another question from Clea. She said, how much work did Within do to actually build out the programs for culture? Did you coach and create strategies and give those to leaders and let them implement?
Awesome question. Yeah, so all of these are co-created. So in order to make sure that they work in the business, we can't just go and give them something off the shelf. Obviously, we know things that have worked in other businesses, especially if we're working in the hospitality space. We've got a lot of experience in hospitality, so we know what it means to be a hospitality employee, but we can't make assumptions. And everybody inside a business knows their business better than we ever will, right? Because they live and breathe it every day. So each of these elements of the toolkit are co-created with the stakeholders that are most relevant. So taking on board things like this, the uplifting lives strategy and the employer brand story, those were co-created with a group from across the business, because actually that's something that no matter where you work in the business, you could have an input into the strategy and the employer brand story. So the co-creation is critical. I think even back to the question on consensus, when you bring this back to the business, rather than saying some consultants made this, it's made by the people for the people, is quite critical. And I think that lends to the watch out that I also had was, don't make an assumption that something's going to work. As part of that co-creative process, test everything. So all of those toolkits have been pilot tested with groups of actual employees before we actually roll it out across the business. And that's critical to our approach. So even something like the immersion programs, we pilot test all of the workshops and the exercises that we have in them and offer different ways of building meaning and learning and connecting that we think will work. But by testing it, we find the right approach for the client. So don't make an assumption that one thing is going to work for every client you have, but build on the foundations of your knowledge. You've got great experience. You're going to know some tips and tricks that are going to work for all clients, but we always pilot test everything.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Just a little time check that we've got 15
Yeah.
minutes. So yeah, we'd love to at the end too. Sorry, I know you've got so much brilliant things to say.
I know. Let's whip through this one real quick so that we can go to some questions. So So we built meaning, we're embedding into EX. Now we need to make sure that the purpose and values are being used as a compass. And for this, I wanted to talk about Amy's Kitchen, and I hope all the Americans on the call know Amy's Kitchen. This is Amy, or this is Andy and Rachel from Amy's Kitchen. They're the founders. Amy's Kitchen creates sustainable, organic, vegetarian food that you can find in either the canned or the frozen aisle. And they were really pioneers in this space. They hadn't codified what they stood for. We started working with them in 2016, and we developed their purpose and their values. And really, of course, this was about, again, legacy, passing down the business to the rest of their family. Amy in Amy's Kitchen is their daughter. So how do we pass on what we stand for? But also, how do we get our leadership to start to make the kinds of decisions that have helped us grow the business? We've scaled it from one pot pie that we sold in California into what is a global business now, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So how do we start to scale? And so with Amy's Purpose is one of the ones that is my favorite of that we've worked with over the years. And I love it because it's got so many drawers inside of it. So I thought I would share that with you. Their purpose is to make it easy and enjoyable for everyone to eat well. What this provides for the business is a little bit of a compass that they can use to make decisions to grow the business. So they want to hold on to some principles that are dear to the founders. They will always be sustainable. They will always be organic. They will always be vegetarian. They will always put the consumer's affordability first. So how do we make sure that we can get our products out to as many people as possible so that families around the world can eat well at a very affordable and competitive price? And those things are really hard to do when you're growing a business. So the purpose becomes a little bit of a compass, and each of these words has a little bit of a decision-making process within them. So we use the purpose and we use the values with the Amy's executive and leadership team to teach them what makes a great quality decision and to help them to use it in everyday decision-making, as well as the decision-making for strategic growth. Another way to really use values as a compass, and this is an example of the within values, is to turn them into behavior sets that really help guide everyday actions. So one of our values is make change fun. One of the things we do with our clients at this stage of embedding is to break down the behaviors within a value set and turn them into different grades of behaviors. And this is very useful for performance management, but in the within world, it's very useful for feedback. And so really making sure that we want to have a feedback culture means we have to get very explicit around what is expected of us. So you can see here that make change fun means unleashing the creativity in others, being playful, and working with the energy that drives growth. And for each of those, we have a different scale of behavior that we work with. And I really believe that behaviors drive performance, but like a great musician or a great athlete, you can never always be exceeding at the end of a behavior. Certain situations puts us in a different experience, and sometimes things are more stressful, or they might be more difficult for us, and it's harder to show up to a behavior. I can't give my team feedback on that if I don't have clarity of what that behavior looks like. So this kind of framework acts as a very strong compass to how you start to develop people within the business and show them how to show up to behaviors and build their skill and muscle around things in a different way. And I think this is just critical to, this is something I want to see in all of our clients now, that they've taken the behaviors and values and turned them into a performance management toolkit, because I don't think we can show up to the purpose and values unless we have this level of granularity. But what that requires is a feedback culture. And I think one thing that I've learned in my many years, even just in leading our business, is don't assume that you have a feedback culture, and don't assume that your clients have one either. And I think one thing that I've really noticed right now in working with clients around the world is CEOs and executives expect a level of autonomy within their business, but they also expect accountability. And I don't think we can have a purpose-driven business without a real sense of accountability in the business. We have to be able to show up with integrity. But the thing that's lacking in most companies right now is a feedback culture. And that really lends itself to people learning and growing within the business. And so embedding behaviors requires that you have a feedback culture, and you might find that you have to help your client understand what that is and to build one, because never assume that one exists already. That's the three things I wanted to share today. I also have some stuff on measurement, Sarah, but maybe we could stop for a question and make sure that we've got some time for anything else in the room.
Yeah, great. No, this is brilliant, Jeff. Thank you. Trevor is asking, what is Amy's brand essence? How does it line up with their purpose? And which one is used for decision making, the brand essence or the purpose? It is
Okay.
thing.
Good question. Good question. And I think if you're working in brand strategy, you will find sometimes you've got the brand essence and you've got brand attributes, or you've got personality, right? That is the external expression of the brand. For our clients and someone like Amy's, they have one purpose, one set of values, and that is where the decision making lives. The expression of the brand, they definitely have brand attributes. They have personality. They have a way of, expressing themselves through different packaging or marketing, social media. It all comes back to the purpose and values for Amy's. That is the core of who they are and what they do. And I think understanding how you take either something that's been created before, like a brand essence and a personality, and reflexively put that in alignment with the purpose and values is one skill. But taking purpose and values and deriving brand essence and personality is another. And I think that if you can get those, you've got to get those two into alignment. I think with Amy's, they are very much in alignment. I think the core thing for Rachel, where we saw her photo earlier, is she's really passionate about the marketing and the way they express themselves and connect with consumers. And she always brings it back to the purpose. So that's the number one thing. Like, is this helping people understand who we are and live up to that? And then the other value that she uses, one of their values is take care of each other. Rachel wants everybody who buys an Amy's product to feel like they're loved through the food. And so that's a tall ask for both the makers of the food and the marketing, but it's the thing that she always comes back to is, does this demonstrate that we're taking care of each other? And I think that's the mantra of the founders.
Brilliant. Tons of questions coming in, Jeff. So Craig is asking, has your agency always been culture focused? Because his challenge is even getting to this stage, because a lot of his freelance strategy work is for design agencies. So design is seen as this kind of holy grail rather than the culture piece. And have you had to make that kind of transition? And how did you get clients to see culture to be a critical part of brand?
That's an awesome question. Yeah, when we started within, we didn't consider ourselves to be a culture agency. Our first product was really, we'll help you codify your purpose and your values, and then we'll help you create a brand identity that expressed that, because that was some work that we'd done before. And we'll help you tell the story of that. So that was what we started with. But I felt like that wasn't creating the impact that we wanted to create. And I think now we partner with awesome folks who do the identity end of things, because they can do that better. We still work on the story element of it, because I think that helps in the meaning building. You've got to get the story right. Culture emerged as a word for us maybe sort of around 2019, 2020. I think the problem I had with it at first was culture kind of was at that time was pushing you down into the HR team. And I don't want to work just with the HR team. I want to work with the C-suite, because there goes the leader, there goes the culture. So we have to be very careful that we don't get pushed into one department, because that doesn't help integrate purpose and values. We have to be multidisciplinary, multi-level, like I said before. So I think you've got to use that word with caution. And sometimes I don't use that word. When we're working with our clients in Asia, we never use it, because it means something different there. We talk about growth and we talk about strategy more so than we talk about culture. But at the essence of it, we're working with culture. And so I think being adaptive is really important to that, so that you're working at the right level.
Perfect, thank you. And then B is also asking, could you recommend ways to build a feedback culture, please?
Oh gosh. B, can you help? Oh gosh, so the work is never done. It's like just when I think at within we're getting it right, I'm like, ugh, it's still not enough. I think first of all, I think for me, feedback is a dirty word. I told you at the beginning, I've been a musician all my life. I used to run a record label and make records. Feedback to me means noise for one thing, because that's the musical translation of what feedback is. But I used to hate any review of any record I ever got. I hated. I didn't want anyone's feedback in that way. So I had a very negative perception of feedback. So in any client that you're working with or in your own business, you're going to have people that have very negative perceptions of that word. So what I'm hoping at Within we pivot it to is a learning culture where feedback becomes a core mechanism of helping us grow. And we all want to do a better job. We want to grow our skills and talents. And you can't do that without an understanding of the impact of your work. So it becomes critical to growth. But I think the other word that I think is important is advice. Like, how are you getting advice from people that you see as mentors and as stakeholders, so that it's not just about critical opinion of your work, but actually like some top tips and tactics that can help you grow and that can help you take control of your own professional development. And I think when that frame is used, that feedback is there to help you grow, not to tell you you've done something wrong, and that feedback is an invitation to seeing things differently, not an opinion of how something should be done, you start to create energy towards more feedback in the business. I think working in hospitality, feedback is there all the time. Like, I often will sit in a restaurant and notice what's going on with feedback. There's constant feedback loops going on. When you work in the knowledge economy, like we all do, feedback is rare. Like, you ask for it a certain time and you're like careful of how you do it, or it's a critique, right? So we've got different perceptions of it. And I think you want to ritualize feedback. You want to get it to be useful to everyone, and you've got to get people to overcome their fear of it. So it's not easy, B.
Rob is asking, he said he really loves how PVA literally glues everyone together. But then he asks, how different does Cartier really want or need to be from Hermes? Surely there's a comforting expectation from staff and customers that they are pretty similar in attitude and outlook.
That's an awesome question, because I think there's a standard level of service, especially when you're working at the luxury level, that is just expected, right? So those tend to be SOPs, or standard operating principles, that if you go to Cartier, Hermes, or you go to One and Only or Four Seasons, are kind of indistinguishable. I call it like, it's where do I put the fork, right? So that's the one thing. But the emotional intelligence element of the brand experience, the way that we connect with the guest or the client, that can be very distinctive. And that can be in the way we use language. It can be in the way that we use body language as well. So One and Only, when you go to One and Only, everybody greets you with the heart, hand on heart. That's a signature thing that really exemplifies the first of their values, which is warmth. And so you begin to create those brand markers that are distinct, but also it's the way of being that becomes a lot more distinctive than just the where do I put the fork, or the how do I take the jewelry out of the cabinet. Those are SOPs. But the way that you embed the values, that can become very distinct. And it's our job as strategists to find that distinct magic. Every client thinks they're distinct. They tend to be, but what they think is distinctive tends not to be what is distinctive. And that's the art and the science, isn't it, Sarah, of the magic of the framework.
Not a true word has been said, right? I know we've only got a couple more minutes, Jeff. Has anyone got any other questions? You can feel free to jump in and talk to if that's easier. I'm cognizant of your time and Jeff's time. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining also. Any other big questions? No.
I think that was my question.
Sarah, sorry, yes, that you
said.
I jumped in ahead and got it in advance. Yeah, I mean, really interesting to see some of the kind of purpose statements and how they've been defined. And I think, you know, my question was around what do you do when a company has defined a purpose that maybe isn't quite aspirational or exciting enough? And how do you help them evolve that? Clearly, you're not going to undo all that work and thinking because it's very close to them. But how would you help them evolve that and kind of, you know, kind of raise their aspirations a bit and create something that can be built on for the external brand as well?
It's an awesome question. Often we get pulled in either with an existing purpose statement there, or can you fix this thing? It's not working, or something's not right. What is it? Like the diagnosis, right? That's why we have the purpose formula, which I said is in the guide to finding purpose. It's problem, impact, role. I firmly believe you have to demonstrate to the client the dysfunction of their purpose statement. And that is what you will find is the purpose statement is technically wrong. So therefore, you've got a bit of science to back up, right? So you're able to show them it's not right, it's not fit for purpose. And so therefore, we're going to have to get it right, because if we don't get it right, we can't do the things you want. It's not going to help us drive growth. I think one thing that's important is I often say that purpose statements can be very beige. Like they don't have to necessarily be inspirational. They have to be right. So make it easy and enjoyable for everyone to work well, has great energy and alliteration, and it's got great flow. It could be someone else's purpose statement. That's okay, but it's right for Amy's, and it on itself is not going to inspire the business towards all the things it needs to do. It has to work in conjunction with the other things. And I've often said that launching a purpose statement doesn't come to the business, doesn't come. No one, when you see a purpose statement, is going to go, oh my God, glitter cannons and balloons have gone off. However, last week, we launched the purpose statement for OCBC Bank in Singapore, and I didn't know this was going to happen. But we did a whole meaning building exercise. And right at the end of that, the CEO and the chairman got on stage and they hit a big buzzer, and the purpose statement went across the screen to like 250 liters, and like smoke, fog machines went off. And I was just like, okay, now I've seen it all. I think you really can do whatever you want with something to make it exciting and inspiring. And I couldn't believe it happened. I ate humble pie, because yeah, you can put a glitter cannon off. And the feedback from that was, everyone was inspired. We're all standing for the same thing now. It felt right for the business. It was authentic for them. And I think because it was the right, it worked, it had integrity, and they went through the meaning building exercise. They were able to set the glitter cannon off.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I feel better about where I am now already.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Christine had a question that she did send to us earlier. Sorry, Christine, we got onto other topics, but she was asking, how do you build awareness in clients to even consider brand and culture? You know, what questions or thinking can we encourage to give them the aha moment of realizing the importance of these things for themselves?
Yeah, and I think that comes down to, I think the business case builder, like how is this going to drive growth for us? Like, what is it there for, right? And I think going back to what I said about from fluff to function is, if they think that brand and culture is just fluffy things, like it's too feely, if you have an executive team that's all think and all numbers, you got to speak their language. So make it all about numbers for them. And if I can leave you with one quick thing that we didn't get to discuss that I hope answers that question, is that there are tangible things that you can use to measure the intangible. And each of these things, engagement all the way through to revenue and loyalty, is a core business driver that's either going to earn money or cost money. So you've got to speak the language of them first before you get into the nuts and bolts. And like I said, like culture can feel like a very fluffy thing for people, but actually it does deliver growth for folks. And you've got to get them to understand that. So rather than going in and telling them, here's all the metrics I can do to help you grow your business through culture, you got to get the leadership team to have that learning themselves. And they don't learn this stuff. So there's a bit of a learning opportunity there to take them on the journey and help them to find that for themselves, so that they actually see the power of brand and the power of culture. And that journey can take some executives some time. But what a great space to play.
Beth, this has been amazing. I know you have to run, and I'm sure everyone else has to run. But we could hear you for hours. Thank you so much. I hope that helped everyone on the call. You can reach Jeff through his website or within People on LinkedIn.
Or this QR code, which I learned how to do today. I
Oh,
never thought the QR code was going to be useful, but if you scan this, it takes us to our blog page, and hopefully you'll listen to our podcast.
Please do. Honestly, just shares so much insight. It's a great team and a great company to work with. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you, Sarah. This has been like super awesome. And I just really value everybody showing up today. And thank you for all the questions. And I hope there's been something useful there.